Hi, everyone, and welcome to our show. Today, we're going to be talking about chronic pain and long-term disability claims.
You're watching Your Disability Lawyers with David Scher and Samantha Scher. Contact Scher Lawyers today for a free consultation. There are no fees unless you win your case.
When you're dealing with chronic pain, you may or may not have a diagnosis from your doctor. And I think that's a big challenge when it comes to applying for long-term disability benefits because you may not know exactly what to write on the form. You could be dealing with fibromyalgia, you could be dealing with chronic fatigue syndrome or chronic pain syndrome, or you may not yet have a diagnosis. And insurance companies will typically be skeptical of these applications, and you might actually have to fight for getting the benefits that you deserve from the outset when you have a chronic pain claim.
Why are these claims problematic? Well, I always like to say that they're problematic for you as someone making the claim because it's difficult to get the type of evidence that's going to be convincing or compelling to an insurance company. But it's problematic for the insurance industry as well because these claims really do come down to credibility. And they have trouble denying the claims or at least fighting them when they are pursued because it's made it be difficult to prove these claims, but it's also difficult to disprove these claims. And that's where we come in and are able to make some persuasive arguments about seeing the whole person, understanding what they're going through, what's the motivation to be making this claim. Is there something better that they could be doing, like working and making perhaps considerably more money working? When I say motivation, the insurance companies like to think that people who are making disability claims are doing so because they don't want to work, they hate their job, and they'd much rather sit at home and collect money from the insurance company. That's somewhat cynical, but that is kind of the approach that they have to these types of claims.
Let's talk a little bit about how you might be feeling if you had your claim denied for a chronic pain condition. So it's going to go over to Adam now to talk about that.
I've spoken to a lot of clients over time who are dealing with chronic pain, and my experience from speaking with those clients is that it's a particularly difficult condition to manage. I mean, the thing with chronic pain is, of course, you've got the physical side of things. You've got the constant pain, the constant discomfort. But a lot of clients tell me that it's more than that. Obviously, being in pain and discomfort and knowing that there is not necessarily a foreseeable end to that pain and discomfort, of course, naturally wears you down. So clients tell me that they start to experience mental health symptoms, depression, anxiety, that kind of thing. And therefore, I think it's a very difficult condition, and I think that it's a vicious cycle, both in terms of the physical side of things and also the mental health side of things. And another sort of experience I've heard from clients who are dealing with chronic pain is that it's a particularly frustrating condition because you can have the occasional good day. And I think clients might wake up one day and say, oh, I'm feeling okay, I'm going to tackle this and I'm going to tackle that, and feel positive, which is really great. But they often tell me that they end up paying for that in the hours and the days which follow. And therefore it sort of drives home those mental health symptoms. And this is why I say it's sort of like a vicious cycle. Any client who has been denied disability benefits finds it very difficult to deal with. I think it's particularly difficult when you are dealing with a condition like chronic pain. A client who is suffering from chronic pain and applies for disability benefits naturally expects that claim to be approved because they know that they're dealing with constant pain and discomfort, that it isn't getting any better, and that they can't work. Therefore, when they get that denial, it is particularly difficult to deal with. And when we're talking about something like chronic pain, it's a subjective condition, right? It relies on the client's accurate self-reporting of symptoms, to his or her physician. So unlike something objective like a broken arm or a broken leg, a client can't just pay a local clinic to do an x-ray and prove to the insurance company that that condition exists and prevents them from working. Oftentimes, even if there is a lengthy trail of clients reporting symptoms to their physicians, that is not enough for the insurance company. The insurance company will say, well, look, you're exaggerating or you're not being honest about the nature and extent of your symptoms, and therefore when that client is faced with that disability benefits denial, it is very difficult for them to move forwards without the help of lawyers. And I guess that, as is the same with any denial, once you get denied benefits, that then creates financial worries. There are financial implications as far as a denial is concerned. And when you add all of that in to the physical symptoms and the mental health symptoms that somebody might be experiencing, it's not a good combination. So I think there's a misconception that we only speak to clients who have been denied their benefits or terminated from their benefits. But in fact, we're speaking to clients who have been approved benefits as well, to be able to guide them through the process and give them tips and support for dealing with that. And I think there's a natural thought out there that if you're approved for benefits, that's the end of the story. I've been approved, the insurance company is going to pay me on a monthly basis and everything's going to be okay. And as much as I wish it was like that, unfortunately, that is not always what we hear. When you are approved for disability benefits, that does not mean that you are approved indefinitely. And you are still going to have to deal with the insurance company. So the case manager is going to be contacting you on a regular basis, and they're going to be asking lots of questions about how you're doing, why you can't get back to work, if the symptoms are worse, if they're better. And that can be very stressful for clients. You're dealing with a significant condition like chronic pain, having to deal with ongoing calls and communication from the insurance company, having to run around and get records and reports from your doctors and things like that, really takes the focus away from what you want to be doing, which is focusing on your symptoms and trying to make the best recovery possible. So I think it's great if you get onto and are approved for disability benefits, but it can come with its own anxieties and worries for sure. I often say to clients when they contact us, I wish I could just wave a magic wand and get them back to their pre-disability selves, and unfortunately that's not something I can do. What we can do is we can take away the burden and the stress of dealing with the insurance company. You don't want to have to be fighting the insurance company when you're going through the symptoms associated with a condition like chronic pain. It's hard enough to deal with an insurance company when you're fit and well. To have to take your focus away from the symptoms and to use all your physical strength and your mental strength to argue and battle with the insurance company is not something you want to be doing. So our aim really is to get involved at an early stage and to protect and shield the client from the insurance company. We want to take the burden of that side of things away so that the client can concentrate on focus on their symptoms and making the best recovery they can. And I think that probably one of the things that sometimes puts clients off contacting us is that they're worried about the financial side of things. They're worried about the money and paying lawyers and all of that kind of thing. And we get that. We know money's tight. As I say, when you have a denial or a termination of benefits, naturally there are financial implications as a result of that. And we have set up our funding model in a way that clients don't need to worry when they contact us. There are no charges to talk to us. If we are instructed, there is no retainer fee to pay up front for our services. There is no requirement to pay up front for disbursements things like court fees, medical record fees, any of that. And we don't charge you any amount for our legal services or disbursements unless you win the case. And if we take the case on, we're not acting on an hourly basis, so you're not going to be billed if you want to phone and talk to us or get guidance or support on something. That is what we're here for, and we encourage clients to reach out to us and speak to us when they need that support and guidance, both in terms of contacting us following a denial or a termination of benefits and as the case is going along.
So Gianna is 42 years old, and she worked as an administrative assistant or a receptionist in a school. And so that job involved having to deal with a lot of different people, students, administrators, and quite a bit of paperwork. So I think at times she felt it was overwhelming, and after a number of years doing that job and some other personal issues she had, it was starting to weigh on her. She was having some depression and some mild mental health concerns, but nothing that meant that she couldn't keep working. And then some time went on, and she started having some more pain, particularly pain in her neck and in her lower back. Sometimes it was radiating down into her legs when she was sitting for long periods of time. So she wasn't sure if it was to do with her desk job or, what was the reason for this pain. She went to see her family doctor, who made a referral to a specialist, and even the specialist couldn't really diagnose her with any condition at that time. She did have some imaging, I think an MRI or an X-ray, and that really didn't show anything aside from the usual sort of degenerative changes that come with aging, which is not really unusual for somebody in their 40s. And she made an application for long-term disability benefits to her insurance company, because she couldn't continue to work with this pain and with the ongoing stress and anxiety that she was dealing with. And unfortunately, her claim was denied. And she felt like she really had no options. She needed the money. She was a single mother, and she had no other support or no other income. So she felt like she had no choice but to go back to work. So she talked to her employer, who was accommodating, and the employer said, okay, we'll have you back on a part-time basis. So you're going to do 60% of the number of hours you were doing before. And she said, okay, I think I could try doing that. And she did it. She returned to work on a gradual basis, increasing the number of hours over a few weeks. And eventually she worked up to working, let's say 6 hours a day instead of the 8 hours. And that did impact the amount of money she was earning, because she was an hourly wage worker. So she did make less money, but at least she was earning enough money to survive and continue on for a while longer. But that wasn't the end of Gianna's story. Unfortunately, her pain got worse, and she had to go off work again, and she had to make a new claim. By that time, she had some more information from her doctor, and she had been diagnosed with fibromyalgia. However, her claim was still denied. And at that time, she called Share Lawyers. So David, why don't you tell our viewers what happened once Gianna called Share Lawyers?
So when she contacted us, and she now had this diagnosis of fibromyalgia, there's an important factor that Samantha mentioned, is the fact that when she returned to work because of her original denial, she had gone down to part-time works to that 60% level. And had she contacted us when she was originally denied, we would have been able to pursue a higher level of benefits than when she contacted us, because she had returned to work for a period of greater than 6 months and basically had to start the process all over again. But when she made her new application after she got the diagnosis and could not continue with the part-time work, her benefit amounts were going to be based on her part-time hours rather than her full-time hours, which means if she was entitled to, say, a benefit of 60%, now she was only going to get 60% of 60%. So it was like a drop of more than $1,000 a month in her disability benefit. Just an important footnote about Gianna's return to work. In her case, because she went down to 60% of her hours, so she had been working 40 hours a week, and 60, in her case, under her policy, 60% was about 24 hours. The cutoff point for having no LTD benefits at all was 20 hours. And in some cases, if you go back and are working not enough hours to qualify for any LTD benefits, that could completely kill your case. So it's important, if you're considering part-time work, to take a look at your booklet to make sure you understand what the minimum number of hours are in order to qualify for LTD benefits. So that's an important thing to keep in mind, is that when you have been cut off or denied initially, even if there's no diagnosis and you feel like you have no choice, speak to us at that time or speak to a disability lawyer to find out if you do have any options before you go back to work, and at least understand what your policy may say about that, so that you're not shooting yourself in the foot and reducing the value of your potential claim if you can't continue working. But in any event, in Gianna's case, we were still able to pursue her claim, even though it was for a lesser amount, and we did that. She had tried initially to contact a lawyer from her local community who was a general practitioner who did, whatever. And, with the best of intentions, this lawyer tried to help her in writing a letter and things of that nature. It just sort of prolonged the process. It didn't work. It did not result in her getting her claim approved. And now another few months had gone by. And fortunately, she got in touch with us while there was still a little bit of time to be able to get this claim filed with the courts, because there are deadlines, and if you're too late, you may be out of time. So we got it in, and we were able to gather some medical information, arranged for her to see a doctor that we sent her to provide a stronger opinion. And we were able to get the case to mediation, and we were able to negotiate a fair settlement for Gianna. And she was very appreciative of that.
So I think there's several key takeaways that we should learn from Gianna's story. It's not just about the diagnosis that's important. And some people think that, you apply to the insurance company and they deny you on the basis of a lack of medical information or no diagnosis, or that they don't think you meet the test for disability. But frankly, when somebody contacts me and says, well, I don't have a diagnosis, but I'm dealing with chronic pain, I can't get out of bed, I'm taking all these heavy painkillers, I can't get to work. I mean, we view that as being legitimate, and it doesn't really matter if there's a diagnosis. If you're having symptoms that are preventing you from being able to work, then I view that as a legitimate claim. So I think that that's one key takeaway. Another thing to piggyback on what David was talking about, that if you go back to work at a lower number of hours, it could significantly impact the amount of your LTD benefits that are supposed to be paid by the insurance company. So just be cautious if you're considering returning back to work on a part-time basis. The other thing to mention is that you should always contact a lawyer as soon as possible. If you're having any questions or doubts about your insurance disability claim, you can contact Share Lawyers. We provide a free consultation regardless of what's happening with your claim. If you just want some advice, if you just want to talk about your options, or if you want to pursue a lawsuit, our lawyers are here to talk to you all the time and help explain some of these nuances and try and help you to get the benefits that you rightfully deserve. Gianna did eventually come and see an experienced disability law firm, which was Share Lawyers, but she consulted with a local lawyer first, which was not anything wrong. The problem with that local lawyer was that he didn't really know the nuances of disability law. He didn't know the appropriate approach that would help Gianna to get the best possible settlement. And he didn't know that you should be starting a lawsuit right away and not necessarily wasting time with numerous letters and appeals. And And it's, there's different approaches, but I would say most importantly, you should be hiring an experienced disability lawyer who deals with these insurance companies day in and day out, and knows all their tricks, and knows how to get the client the best possible result.
You've been watching Your Disability Lawyers with David Scher and Samantha Scher. Contact Scher Lawyers today for a free consultation and put our 35 years of experience to work for you. There are no fees unless you win your case.